The following lecture is a YouTube-adapted translation of my C-Day 2015 lecture, which I wrote for the Swedish Zeitgeist Movement. This is the last out of 3 lectures that I was heavily involved in creating and/or presenting. See the description for more information and sources. I have in my 2 latest lectures talked a lot about a systems approach to problem solving, automation and employment, but so far I haven't really touched on the social aspect, and that's what I'm gonna do here. Because at its foundation, a society is nothing without individuals. What's more, the whole point of a society is to make life good for us, to ensure that we are happy and safe. There are, however, a handful of people who seem to have forgotten this. They say things like, you have to break some eggs to make an omelette. Okay. Is it ever the case that you feel like, oh, today would be a great day for me to be in a car accident on my way to work. I need to break them eggs. We are drenched in a color of gray. We're brought up to believe that this is the way it's supposed to be. Gotta take the bad with the good. Some other nonsense that I hear occasionally is this one. If I were always happy, I would be depressed. If I were always happy, I would be depressed? Despite this, I actually believe that we all want to live as well as possible. What I'm advocating is not a utopia, but merely a societal system that are so much better than what we have today. I'm gonna spend a few more minutes talking about our current situation, but then I'm going to focus on how we can change ourselves, how we can live, and finally discuss some tools to help us on the road to a better world. Stress. Yeah, it's something that we are all familiar with. It arises when we feel that we are pressured in some way or another. It's all about some kind of fear for what we can lose materially or socially if we don't perform sufficiently in time. Stress increases the risks of depression, memory problems, pain, fatigue, arteriosclerosis, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, infections, and so on. A lot of the stress we experience is related to our job, and in particular to be judged by others, which tend to lead to a lot of anxiety. We are today, at least in Sweden, twice as productive, but work almost as much as we did in 1970. One would think that we would need to work half as much if we were twice as productive, but apparently that productivity only results in more stress and increased mental illness instead. That's how we roll. Depression can also lead in certain circumstances to violence, criminality, or drug misuse. To be fatigued and depressed often results in one losing one's job, and it's not uncommon that in those scenarios the thought starts to wander towards suicide. We know now from, for example, the economical crisis in Greece, that the suicide rate skyrockets when the economy plummets. And even in relatively stable countries such as Sweden, the number of suicides increase. The truth of the matter is that 800,000 people take their life globally every year, which is 5 times as many who dies in war. So yeah, I really don't think that we've found some healthy balance between the bad and the good. I think we can do so much better. We have today a societal system that forces us into situations of competition and unnecessary deadlines. A system that tries to motivate us with a whip rather than the carrot. It should come as no surprise that people behave immoral when stress causes everything from depression, anxiety, sickness, violence to drug misuse. We, the people who behave like this, are not happy or safe. So it seems to be fairly obvious that the societal structure of today doesn't work. Alright, but if we're going to talk about an alternative system, then we first have to think about if an alternative system is possible. Maybe we have already reached the best of possible worlds. It might be the case that we as human beings fundamentally are so greedy, hateful, violent, and impulsive that we simply can't escape our current way of life. Is it like a good friend once told me, that we are still just monkeys throwing bananas at each other. Yes, this is clearly about the possibly never-ending debate of nature versus nurture. To what percentage does the genes or environment determine one's behavior? I will argue that this picture, with the scale, is completely wrong. But first I want to perform a little thought experiment. I want you to take a few seconds, maybe pause the video, and think about what's common for all people on the planet, for all ages. Something that can't be affected by the environment. It can be something bad or something good. It doesn't matter. The idea is to try to put a finger on the human nature. Alright, good. Keep that thought in mind. There's something that's called feral children. These are children who, in one way or another, have grown up outside of civilization. One of these people are Oksana Malaya. She was born in 1983 as a completely normal girl. However, her parents were severe alcoholics and didn't care for her. From the age of 2, she lived with feral dogs until the authorities found her and took care of her 5 years later. At the age of 8, she couldn't talk. She walked and ran on all four, slept on the floor, ate and washed herself, and for all other practical purposes acted just as a dog. Furthermore, she couldn't recognize her own image in the mirror, something that children raised by humans learn at the age of 18 months. So, it's apparent that the environment plays a humongous role. I believe that what's common for all humans is that we want to be participatory, that we want to be part of a context. And what's unique for us as a species is our unparalleled ability to adapt. There's life forms on this planet that can eat sulfur, that become hundreds of years old. Life forms that can fly across the oceans or endure without water for weeks. But our superpower is to adapt and change. We have created a plethora of different cultures and settled on all the continents. We are neither good or evil. We are malleable. So I think that a better way to look at the interplay between genes and environment is this. The genes are the hand we are dealt to play, but the environment is how we play, if we're going to reach success or not. So, can we change? Absolutely. And it's really nothing radical I advocate, just a small shift in focus from money, profit, and competition to collaboration, empathy, and well-being. Speaking of games, society is really just a game. None of the institutions that we have been accustomed to really exist. Governments, nations, poverty, laws, money, corporations, and political parties. These are all concepts that we have made up, categories we've created. We have all grown up to learn how to play, been adapted to this game in particular. Obviously, we need some kind of society game to make sure that billions of people can work together. But it's still important to be able to distinguish between what's made up game rules and what is real natural laws and real needs. Because the game rules are open for adjustment. And today, we can see a growing number of people who start to think that there isn't just a few rules that needs to be amended, but the whole game board seems fishy. I for one second that notion, and I have something else we can play, if we want to. It's called a resource-based economy, and the idea is, believe it or not, that we all should live as well as possible. To a large degree, this can be done by utilizing technology and automation to increase our production efficiency, while at the same time operate within the planetary borders. The Earth is almost a closed system, and we have a very little exchange with the rest of the universe. But thanks to science and technology, we are still able to meet the biological needs of all humans on the planet. So this is the basic outline for a resource-based economy. We have the goal to improve the standard of living for people. We stay within the planetary and ecological borders, and we automate as much as we can. But let's take a closer look at the social aspect. What does a socially functioning society need to offer? I'm thinking calm, or freedom from stress, safety, participation, fellowship, consideration, happiness, and opportunities for self-fulfillment. I mentioned stress earlier and how it's a fear of losing something. In today's society, this fear is very much rational, but when we have shifted our focus towards making life as good as possible, while we simultaneously can meet our needs, there wouldn't be as much to be worried about. Some of you are probably familiar with universal basic income, where everyone is given a sum of money enough to sustain themselves. This is the next stage after that, to create an abundance so that all products and resources become available without a price tag. To wake up every morning knowing that you have roof over your head, food, water, an occupation, and so on, is an incredibly important safety factor. When we can create an abundance, something interesting happens with the way we think. It's actually not ownership that's important, but access. Air is free because there's enough for everyone, and we know it will be there when we need it. So there's no reason to hoard it. The same thing will happen if we have, for example, food for everyone, if we create an abundance. In a resource-based economy, everyone already has guaranteed access to food, water, accommodations, etc. Hence, there wouldn't be a reason to steal, so much of the criminality we see today would disappear. Why doesn't fish in aquariums such as the New England Aquarium in Boston eat each other when they would do so in the wild? Because the staff make sure that all the animals are properly fed, and thus there is no need for the fish to compete and kill each other. So my question to you is, are we smarter than fish? If we now were to automate and let computers arrive at decisions instead of humans in a resource-based economy, it doesn't follow that people would be marginalized. There are always new achievements and experiences that we want to be a part of. In a society where we on a global societal level truly care about people's well-being and have free access to education, the alternatives for being participatory and having an impact are many more, while the risks of societal exclusion are significantly smaller. One's own health and well-being is merely as good as the well-being of society in general. When the requirements to compete and protect one's own property diminish to the benefits of increased cooperation and a more efficient resource distribution, a larger sense of community also emerges. It's no longer yours and mine, but rather ours. During history, we've seen how the concept of a family has expanded from our closest relatives to the city, the nation, and the continent. Is it so far-fetched that we perhaps can feel community with all the world's people? Our ability to practice care is from a societal perspective completely dependent on our ability to apply science. It's thanks to science that we can find out about the psychological and sociological mechanisms which shapes human behavior, and science allows us to shape a society with incentives so that people are encouraged to help each other and spread consideration and care onwards. In today's society, our ability to care is limited by patents, prices, and budgets. If society instead was more structurally open to participation and high accessibility to ideas, products, and services, then everything good that's made or developed will not only benefit the copyright holder, but everyone else as well. Collaboration is encouraged in a society where money and property is not needed because it's not possible to make a private profit to the detriment of someone else. Why destroy and work against a system that's designed to make you as happy as possible? Why would we saw off the branch we ourselves are sitting on? Happiness is perhaps something that can't be created directly by the society, but it's more of an emergent factor when many of the stressors and horrors that we have around us today have been reduced. In the industrialized world, people are generally happy, or at least decently satisfied. But in the rest of the world, there aren't that many happy faces. And maybe, just maybe, would it make us in the industrialized world even happier if the entire world could share the things that makes us that way. In a resource-based economy, where the fundamental maintenance is covered by machines, the opportunities to occupy oneself with one's passion, doing that which is fun and self-fulfilling, are so much greater than what they are today. This is possible because we no longer have to work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. All this, less worries and competition, more access to our collective success, increased access to education and participation, along with more fulfilling occupation, is what I would call social sustainability. There are those who are worried that everyone would be identical in a resource-based economy. I'm gonna let Jack Fresco explain. He was the founder of the Venus Project, which is one of the organizations who works towards a resource-based economy.
We live in an environment that's so loused up, it's very difficult to generate good feelings between people because they come from different places with a different value system and different needs. In the society of the future, someone asked me, would everybody be alike in your society? Yes, in certain areas. They will love the earth and take care of it, stick their hands out when they meet another person from a different culture and say, your values are different than mine. I'd like to learn more about your way of thinking. They will be the same in that way. They will be open to new ideas, learn to listen to new ideas, ask relevant questions about ideas. Yes, in those areas, they will be alike.
Alright, we now know where we are and where we want to go, but how do we get there? Short answer, I don't know. Longer answer, there are so many things that can happen on the way that even if we were to set up some plan with several bullet points, there are a good probability that something we haven't planned for occurs along the way that makes the following points irrelevant. So it's more about having a methodology, a train of thought, for how to address and solve problems as well as changing conditions as we encounter them on the road to a resource-based economy. My first practical advice has a risk of hurting one's ego, so I would like to make you aware of your possible knee-jerk reaction and maybe take a deep breath before continuing. Listen first and then mull over it later. Okay? It's peculiar that we blame those we don't have control over and then expect that something should happen. I mean, the only person that we have control over is ourselves. We can ask others to do what we want, we can even threaten them with violence or bribe them, but we have no absolute guarantee that they will do as we wished. At the same time, there's no one except yourself that can make your thoughts a reality. So the question is really, how are you going to change society? Because if we talk about someone else, perhaps someone who has never even come in contact with these ideas, then we can be very certain that nothing will happen. I obviously don't mean that it's your fault that the world is what it is. What's done is done. But by thinking like this gives you another perspective on things. Most of us has probably said something like, I'm sorry I'm late, but there was so much traffic. This implies that it's the traffic's fault and nothing could have been done to result in another outcome. But if we instead were to think that we ourselves has a responsibility for the world around us, then maybe it would sound something more like this. I know why I'm late. I thought that losing a quarter of our time wasn't worth the effort of giving myself some more margins in case of heavy traffic. From this perspective, it's obvious that it's possible to do something about the outcome. It's also easier to ask oneself if one prioritized correctly. It's then also easier to realize one's own fault and then change one's behavior. It's okay to prioritize work, school, the kids, and so on higher than anything else, but dare to say so. No, I haven't focused on my YouTube videos because I've been playing so much Skyrim instead. Dare to stand up for your reasons, or at least admit to yourself so you have a chance to better yourself. My next advice might be even more triggering, so maybe take another breath. Nobody else ever do something wrong. As we've discussed, we're all a product of our environment. People only act in accordance with the information and the environment they've encountered. Regardless if they are terrorists, feminists, liberals, or Republicans, they never do anything wrong. They just act as they have been conditioned to. They can change, but only if you give them new information or a new environment to relate to. In conclusion of these two very provocative perspectives, you yourself has the responsibility to create change by realizing where you have your priorities wrong, and no one else can ever do anything wrong. I'm not saying this because it's necessarily and ultimately completely true, rather because by thinking like this, you don't have to exhaust yourself being angry at others and can instead use that energy to actually create some change. The essence of this is to be the change you want to see in the world, both in thought and in action. I don't know any of you personally, so I can't say what exactly each and every one of you can do. So you have to ask yourself that question. But maybe the first step is to dare to dream and stand up for one's dreams. Stop accepting the box we're in and dare to take a new perspective. Maybe start rejoicing in robots stealing our jobs. Or maybe in the heat of a general election, stand up and proclaim that there's not more laws and politicians without competence in societal design that we need, but rather carefully applied science for social concern. Or maybe to put your foot down and say that you don't give a shit if there's not enough money to take care of the homeless when we can provide both residency, healthcare and education to them if we want. Put the bar high, dare to be an opinion maker, but be kind, because we're all stuck in the same mess. It's kind of like the story about the emperor's new clothes. We all know that the emperor is naked, but we don't dare to say it because we're not completely sure that everyone else also know. It's thanks to the child who points out the elephant in the room that the people start to realize that they all see the same thing. The emperor is truly naked. It's time for all of us to be that child. Because people want to fit in, and when this almost self-evident truth about a more humane alternative starts to be lifted by different people from different walks of life, then even the more skeptical ones will start to reconsider if this isn't something for them after all. It's not about showing who's right though. It's about education and providing an alternative.
The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and when you choose to go on it, you think it's real, because that's how powerful our minds are. And the ride goes up and down and round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored, and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while. Some people have been on the ride for a long time, and they begin to question, is this real, or is this just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us, and they say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid, ever, because This is just a ride. It's just a ride. And we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice. No effort, no work, no job, no savings of money. A choice right now between fear and love. The eyes of fear want you to put bigger locks on your door, buy guns, close yourself off. The eyes of love instead see all of us as one. Here's what we can do to change the world right now to a better ride. Take all that money we spend on weapons and defense each year and instead spend it feeding, clothing, and educating the poor of the world, which it would many times over, not one human being excluded, and we can explore space together, both inner and outer, forever in peace. Thank you very much. You've been great. I hope